Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's projects, I want to show you the summer projects I'm done with, whether they're finished or not. I want to talk through some of my options for my fall knitting projects, and I want to tell you a story about two new knitters, my quest to sew a notions pouch, and why I had 110-inch green zippers in my basement for nearly 20 years. So let's get started. There are a couple of exciting things that are happening this weekend that you may or may not know about. One of them is local to the Twin Cities metro area here in Minnesota, and the other one is worldwide. So Saturday, September 21st, 2024, is Worldwide Spin in Public Day. So that's a fun time to get together with other spinners. You can often find a local group that is spinning. There is a website for Worldwide Spin in Public Day, which I will leave down below, and you might be able to find a local group that is gathering in some particular location that you could join them with. Or you can just find a spinning friend, go to a brewery, go to a park, do whatever you want and enjoy spinning in public. The second thing that's happening this weekend is an event that our guild puts on once a year. It's called Yarnover. So it's a 3-day event and you have to sign up for various activities. In some cases, like classes or some of the social things or the meals, that kind of thing has to be signed up ahead of time. But tomorrow, there is a Yarnover Marketplace with lots of vendors of all types. This shirt that I got right here that says Sheepwreck on it, I got at the Yarnover Marketplace last year. It was a vendor on the arm I looked, it's called Knit Ba Pearl. She's going to be there again this year. She's a graphic designer. She's got all kinds of fun things to do on t-shirts. And there's obviously lots of yarn. There will be fiber, there will be buttons, all kinds of things that you might want to buy. And it's open to the public. You don't have to pay an entry fee to get access to it. And there are still a few classes that are open. There's morning classes and afternoon classes. And so you can pay when you get there. I'll leave information down below to where you can find out which classes those are. The event takes place at the Crowne Plaza West, Minneapolis. That's in Plymouth. That's a western suburb of Minneapolis. And the marketplace is open from, I believe it's 9 to 5:30. Did I write it down? Yes, 9 to 5:30. And I might see you there tomorrow. I'll be shopping in the morning and then I'm doing volunteering in the afternoon. I'm taking photographs for the shawl contest. So hope to see you there. Hope you're able to come. And if you're not here in the Twin Cities area and you're a spinner, I hope you can take advantage of Worldwide Spin in Public Day. So let's start with the project that I'm done with for the summer, but it's not finished, and that's my Danish night sweater. So for those of you who have been following this saga, you'll remember that I bought 3 skeins of this yarn at Yarnover last year from an independent dyer, and then I got home and I was looking at the pattern again. I was worried that it was going to be cutting it too close. And I really wanted to have a spare skein, so I contacted the dyer, and he had one more skein, and he sent it to me. And then when I started working on the sweater, I just pulled out the first skein, did my swatch. You know, everything was exactly right. And the way the pattern starts is you start with the 2 sleeves, and then you start with the bottom bands. And there's 2 bottom bands that are knit flat. And then once those are done, you join in the round and you overlap just at the edges, you overlap the 2 front bands a little, or 2 bottom bands a little bit. So it took the entire first skein to knit the 2 sleeves and the bottom band. I started a new skein with the front band, and I didn't realize until I was, about this far up, that first skein was not the same color as the second skein. And what I didn't know is if all 4 of them were slightly different shades because it was independently dyed, or if I had 3 skeins that were the same color and 1 that was different, because remember I contacted the dyer. And if that was the case, which one was the odd one? Well, it turned out it was the dark one, the one I knit the 2 sleeves with and the bottom band. So I continued knitting it because my idea was that I would replace this bottom band. So you can see it's a different color here. So my plan all along has been to reknit the bottom band, cut this off, and graft it together. I've talked about that a number of times. That will be the plan. That is not going to change. What I didn't know is how I would feel about the dark sleeves on the sweater. Like that it was possible that I'd be okay with the sleeves being a different shade. And so the plan was I would sew the sleeves on and then kind of live with it and see what I thought. And if I didn't like it, then in February, for Finish It February or Fix It February, however you use that month, I could reknit the sleeves. And I didn't know at what point I'd do the bottom band. For sure I was going to do that. I didn't know if I'd do it this fall or whatever. So I laid it out on a table and put the sleeve next to it. And I thought, I just don't like the difference in color. And so then I put it on here on the dress form, just kind of pinned it on here to see what I would like. And it probably doesn't look exactly the same on your screens as it looks here. The lights in the cameras can change things a little bit. It's not awful, but I don't like it. And I know I don't like it. So I know I'm going to reknit the sleeves. Now, the challenge is that I was pretty sure that the whole sweater could be knit with 3 skeins at the very beginning, but I was worried about it might be close. And what happened was, as I was finishing the sweater and I was finishing this last shoulder, I had to break into the final 4th skein, which is the 3rd skein of the colors that's all the same, this lighter color. Which means that there isn't enough to knit the bottom band and both sleeves completely. I'll run out of yarn. So what I'm going to do when I do reknit these is to leave the cuffs dark on the sleeves and then reknit the sleeves the rest of the way with the lighter color. So that will be my plan in February. But you know, this is a lot of knitting. Like I said, it's fingering weight. It's a lot of knitting and I'm just frankly sick of it. I really like it. I like it a lot. I love the way that the neck came out. The neck was knit in as it was finished. I really like the way it looks. I love the 3 different 8-pointed stars in the front, which are probably hard to see on your screens, but there's 3 different ones. And then on the back, they're the same 3 stars, but again, different from each other. And then there's a smaller one up here. So I really enjoyed this a lot. I enjoyed knitting it, but I am done enjoying knitting it for now. And that's why I have Finish It February, so that when a project needs a timeout or I get sick of it, I need a break from it, whatever it is, I know that I will come back to it in February. It's not going to get forgotten. So this I'll be coming back to in February and with new enthusiasm for this project. So you can expect to see that in February. This is another sweater that you saw me working on over the summer, and the last time I showed it to you, I had sewn these heavy coat buttons on, and I'd put a wide grosgrain ribbon on the back to support the buttons, and that's to prevent vertical stretch so that the weight of the buttons doesn't stretch this out vertically. And I had pinned a thinner strip of grosgrain on the buttonhole side, on one side of the buttonholes. And I wasn't sure if I was going to need, I was pretty sure, but I wasn't positive that I was going to need another one on the other side of the buttonholes. And a couple of people wondered, you know, first of all, why did I need to support this at all? Because this didn't have a weight issue. And the problem is not with vertical stretch on the buttonhole side, it's with horizontal stretch. And with those buttonholes stretching this way, especially since this isn't a super oversized sweater. It's more fitted, and there is some ease, but it's not a ton of ease. So if I was bending or stretching, that could cause the buttonholes to stretch, and then you end up with this kind of curved edge where the buttonholes are. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like. I could have put this one a little bit closer to the edge than I did, but it seems to work just fine. And I finally wove in all of the ends. There weren't a lot of sweater ends to weave in, but there were a lot of seaming yarn ends. I used a gray sock yarn to sew this sweater together because it's bulky weight and because it was a very loosely spun, it was like 3 strands of unspun roving that were kind of lightly twisted together. So there's not a lot of strength in it, like for trying to sew with it, and that would just add even more bulk to the seams. But I needed to deal with those ends under the underarms because this was a seamed sweater. It was knit bottom up and in pieces, and then it had set-in sleeves. So that's really my preference in sweaters. Number 1, set-in sleeves, and number 2, knitting it bottom up when possible. Often with seams on the side. Sometimes if it's a cardigan, the body is knit in one piece. I really like working with smaller pieces. It feels like it's going faster, but it's also just less knitting on my lap as I'm knitting it. I don't like the top-down construction where all of the stitches are on all of the time. And that's just my preference. And as a result, a lot of the sweaters that I have been knitting this year from other people's patterns are older. They're more than a decade old. And because the overwhelming majority of sweaters these days are top-down yoke or raglan, and now drop shoulder, and none of those are the kind of construction that I want. It's not the kind of fit I like. I went through the oversized, the drop shoulder. I went through all of that when I was a newer knitter back in the 80s. So, and I know what I prefer on my body type. And it tends not to be current sweaters. That's not 100% true, but it's true in a lot of cases. So I almost always have some kind of sock pattern on the needles. And in the past couple of years, if it wasn't like a plain vanilla sock for me or one of my relatives, it would be a vintage or antique type of stocking, so I could understand more about how construction of socks and stockings evolved. But this summer, I've been working on a pair of socks for my brother. Now, some of you who have heard me talk about my brother and his socks over the years may have heard me talk to or refer to him as Bigfoot. He's 6'3". He's size 13 feet. I don't know what that is in European, but they're big. Usually when I make socks for him, I use a 6-ply sock yarn. So it's a bit thicker. It's like a heavy sport, light DK weight type of sock. And he's happy with that. And the nice thing about that is because it's thicker yarn, I essentially am knitting the same number of stitches that I would knit for myself if I was knitting myself a pair of socks with 4-ply yarn. So that's always been easy. And he really appreciates the hand knit socks because I was measuring his foot for something about sock heels a few years ago, and he was wearing a commercial sock and he pulled it off so I could measure his foot, and there were all these red marks in his legs. And I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, yeah, the socks you knit for me don't do that. And so I've been on a mission to supply him with new socks once or twice a year. Well, I've been wanting to make him a pair of socks using 4-ply yarn. So I bought this yarn a couple of years ago, and I bought 2 100-gram skeins because it's a self-striping yarn, and I like the socks to match. And the way I knit socks, you know, you have to break the yarn and wind it off in order to get the second sock to match. And the way I knit my heels, let me show you. So this is one of the socks. So you knit down to the heel, and then I use what I call an insta-thought heel. It's like a peasant heel, like an afterthought heel, only you're knitting it when you get to the heel, and then you come and do the rest of the foot. You don't do the whole tube and then go back. And so when I do that, I'm continuing the color pattern down into the heel. When it's time to start the sock, I want to start it where I was in the pattern when I started the heel, so that the instep, the color pattern is just unbroken. It's the same all the way down. So that's just something I like to do. And so that requires winding yarn off every so often. And because he has big feet, I wanted to make sure that I had enough yarn. So I got 2 skeins. So a lot of people will knit toe-up socks so that they can just use all of the yarn up and then the sock is the length it is. And that's fine, but I wanted to make sure that the socks were long enough, like that the leg is the length that he actually wants, not just the length that the ball of sock yarn allows. So I got the 2 skeins, and in total, these socks weigh like 100.6 grams. That doesn't count the yarn that got wound off. So I have about 75 grams of yarn left in the second skein, plus I have the little bits that I wound off. So I could make another pair of socks, either short socks or socks that don't have stripes that match perfectly, or a hat or something like that with the leftovers. But these are the socks that I knit for my brother. So I was knitting them on this road trip, finished the first one, started the second, and I was just kind of like, you know, it's just a big sock. But I had a deadline. That deadline is next week, because my brother, who lives in Michigan and I live in Minnesota, we are both driving to Kansas. And so I'm going to be seeing him there for a weekend. Our dad died a year ago, and his ashes were buried with his second wife so that his third wife could visit him, but then she died 2 months later, and she was buried in her family's cemetery in another town. So we're moving his ashes to where her ashes are. It's a whole thing. Anyway, we're going to be down in Kansas next weekend, so I wanted to give him these socks. So I just really pushed myself to get them done, washed and blocked, so I could show them to you, pack them up, and I'll be able to have him try them on and see what he thinks. The yarn for this was a Reywa 4-ply yarn. It was one of the design line ones. It's not an Arnie and Carlos one. It's a Cafe Facet one. Anytime I see a Cafe Facet colorway in Reywa yarns, I buy it because I really love the way he uses colors. And the first pair of socks that I ever knit for my brother was a Cafe Facet Reywa yarn, but it was a 6-ply. So I'm pretty sure he's going to like these. So now that I'm done working on my summer sweaters, whether they're finished or not, I am ready to get started on some fall projects. And I always like having a sweater project and a sock project. So I'm not sure. I've got 3 sweater projects that I want to choose from, and I'm going to be using this yarn. So you might be wondering, you've probably never seen this sweater on my channel before, and I think it's because I knit this about 10 years ago. It was meant for a friend. We were going to do a trade. She was going to make me a raincoat or wool, some kind of wool raincoat, or I don't know what. She was going to make me a coat, and I was going to make her a sweater. So I started working on it. She did not live near me. She lived on the West Coast. I'm in the middle of the country. Her mom lived here in Minnesota, and so once in a while I would see her when she was in town, and I could show her the progress on it. But I never got to the point where she could try it on, and then she had a really stressful summer, and she had gained 50 pounds. And so this wasn't going to fit her the way it was. So that kind of stalled the project for me. I had to try to figure out how I was going to size it up. And my idea was, oh, I could put like a gussets down the side, and maybe with the cable pattern and sew that in. And that was going to change the armhole size. And I had already knit 2 sleeves. And so then I had to figure out how I was going to do that. And I have a 3rd sleeve here. And I'm not sure I can tell the difference between them. I don't know what I did. I don't know why I have 3 sleeves. I remember knitting the 3rd one and that there was a reason for it, but I don't remember what the reason was. Anyway, this friend is now out of the country I haven't seen her in over 10 years, but I've kept this yarn. So this is something I do when I'm going through, and I talk about this for Finish It February. I'm already talking about Finish It February and it's only September, but when you have a big pile of UFOs, unfinished objects, and it just seems overwhelming, what I recommend, this is what I did the first time I had a huge pile of more than 40 UFOs that I had to sort through, is to figure out, do I actually want to finish this or not? And if not, do I care about the yarn? Do I want to keep the yarn, or do I just want to trash the whole thing or donate it or give it to somebody? Like, what do I want to do? If I like the yarn, I don't frog the project. Usually. One time I did when that particular project had a lot of emotional feelings and it felt really good to frog it. But in this case, I don't have a lot of negative emotional feelings behind it. And I really liked the fabric. I liked looking at it. I really liked knitting the pattern. I just kept the fabric and returned it to my stash. This is available stash yarn. It's too big, way too big for me to just sew it up and wear for myself. I'm not going to try to I'm not going to try to modify this to make it fit me. So if you're trying to come up with ideas of how I can salvage it, I personally would not be interested in doing that. I am interested in reusing this yarn. So that's what I'm looking at. So I have 3 choices. One is to reknit this sweater with this yarn, but in my size. That's one choice. And this sweater is a pullover with a hood on it, but you don't have to use the hood. If you don't want to, you could. For her, I wasn't going to have a hood. And you could have it as a pullover or a cardigan with buttons or with a zipper. And so if I'm going to knit this for me, I might actually do the hood and do it as a zipper hood sweater, because that's something I haven't done before. And there's a particular type of zipper facing that I'm interested in trying. And I thought I was going to be able to try it last year on a project, and then it had a different type of zipper. It needed a different type of zipper facing, so I couldn't do it. So that's one option, is to reknit this sweater, just rip it out and reknit it in my size. The second option, I was looking through my queue on Ravelry. I have sweaters in there that some of them have been in there for many, many years. And there's a man's sweater in there called Beagle that I've always liked. And it's by a designer that I really like. I've made several sweaters from her patterns. And her name's Nora Gone. And I really liked it, and I was looking at it, but it's modeled on a guy with big shoulders, and so it looks very masculine. And I thought, well, if I made it in my size, would it look less and it's a pullover, and I do wear pullovers sometimes, but I really prefer cardigans, not because I want to unbutton them, but just because I like the buttons. It's a decorative feature on a sweater, so I tend to want to knit cardigans. So I was looking at that, and I thought, well, I'm going to look on Ravelry, and I'm going to look for the criteria that I like: bottom up, set-in sleeves, and texture. So cables or texture, or whatever the third option, any of those. And I saw a sweater, a cardigan that I really liked, and it said, oh, the designer was Nora Gone. I'm like, excellent. And I looked at it. It's a free pattern. It's called Drift. And it is the feminized version of that Beagle sweater. It made into a cardigan. It's got waist shaping. It's got the same stitch patterns. I'm like, well, no wonder I really liked it. I've always liked it, but I really like it even more as this cardigan. So that's the second option. And then the third option is one that I bought sometime in the past year. I think one of you recommended it, and I bought it. It's called Oak Ledge. And it has got really kind of that sweet spot of texture and cables without being like super, super cabled, which, takes a lot more yarn and concentration and whatever. And I do like, but maybe just not wanting in this particular sweater. It's got this cable and it comes around the back of the neck. It's an interesting collar, and it's an interesting texture pattern. So I'm like, maybe I'd do that. I think, all 3 of these sweaters are all patterns I like, and I might knit at some point. The one issue I think I might have with the Nora Gone one is that it's almost a blend of the Danish night sweater and the bulky cardigan in terms of the various elements and how texture is used. And I kind of feel like I want to do something different right now. So, so I'm just, trying to pick between the three. I'll put the pattern photos on the screen in each of these for a few seconds so you can see what they look like. Let me know what you think I should knit, not because it's the one that you like, but the one that you think I might like more or might enjoy knitting more, just based on what you know about me. If you don't have any idea what I would like, you could go ahead and say what you like. I'm leaning toward Oak Ledge at the moment, but I really could go with any of them. They all look fantastic. And I can go to the overhead and I can kind of show you some of the other differences or similarities between the patterns, so you can kind of get a sense of what it is I'm looking for and how I compare and how I look at sizing and that sort of thing. So as part of the comparisons, I'm looking at schematics. One of the things I dislike is if a pattern includes a couple of measurements and does not include full measurements, because then I have to draw it and I have to try to figure it out by going through the pattern. And I can do that, but really a good pattern should have a schematic with complete dimensions. So one of the things I'm looking at is, okay, they're all essentially the same across the bust. They're all 40 inches. One of it might be 40 and a half, but they're 40 inches. So they're all the same size that way. They have some different lengths. One of them, I think this one, the Gwendolyn, which is the one that I knit for my friend that has the hood, that one might be a little bit shorter. But if you look at armhole length, this is 8.5 inches. This is the Nora Gone one. It's 8.5 inches deep. This one is 7.5 inches deep. So this one is a shallower armhole. So that's something you need to look for. So if you have arms, like if you think sweaters tend to be too tight for you, like pay attention to how deep the armhole is, how large the sleeve circumference is, so you can notice that in the next pattern you knit, and if that's going to be too tight, then you can modify it. I don't mind a close fitting sleeve. I kind of like that. Then I'm looking at how big around the sleeve is. And so this one is 16 inches across, but this one is 14.5, and this one is 14. So this one is the narrowest, but they're both pretty narrow. This one has quite a long sleeve cap, and that's because this is a narrow sleeve with kind of a deeper armhole relative to how wide it is, which means that the sleeve cap has to be longer in order to fit into that armhole. So that's something interesting. And so then I can look at the pictures and see, well, how does it fit on the model? Is that how I want it to fit me? And I'm not usually worried about things being too tight on my arms, so I can kind of just get a look and see, is that the way I want this to look? So those are the kinds of things I'm looking at. This one, this Nora Gone one, is the only one that has waist shaping. So that might be something where like, oh, I really want waist shaping, then I'd have to think about where I was going to do that. I might use this one as a model for how I was going to place that, or I might just make that determination myself based on where I want the narrowness to fit me. So these are the kinds of things I'm comparing, and for me they all look pretty similarly designed. This one has a little bit larger sleeves, and considering that it's meant to be a hoodie, that might not be a bad thing if they're expecting that you're going to be wearing something under it. I'm always wearing something under my sweaters, so that's just something that I would have to think about. Do I want it that wide, or would I want it to be something different? But these are the kinds of things that I take into consideration when I'm looking at a pattern. So neither one of my daughters lives here in Minnesota. One lives in Chicago and the other lives in the Netherlands. My daughter Nina is the one that lives in the Netherlands. She and her fiance Sam came to the US for 3 weeks and for a nice long visit. They spent a week. They flew into Chicago and saw Sophia for a week, stayed with her, and then they drove up along with Sophia's girlfriend. And so the four of them drove up all the way up to the Twin Cities, and they stayed here for the weekend to go to the state fair and to look at various Minneapolis sites and whatever that are different in the summer than they are in the winter, which is when Sam has been here before. Sophia's girlfriend Amanda mentioned that she wanted to learn to knit. And one night we were at a brewery seated outside with the entire extended family. There was, I think, 10 of us. And it was getting cool, and Nina pulled this mohair sweater out of her purse, out of her bag, and just put it on to warm. It's a very lightweight mohair little pullover. And Amanda saw it and said, "Oh, did you make that? I want to learn how to make, that's what I want to learn how to do." So they went and bought some yarn and needles. And that evening, the next evening, we all sat down at the table. And Nina's an accomplished knitter. I taught her to knit a couple of years ago when we visited her in the Netherlands. She'd been working at Stephen and Penelope for a year and a half in Amsterdam. And she just quit working there right before they came on their 3-week trip. So she's a very good knitter. I came upstairs and got some more balls of yarn and needles. So that's Sam, who has learned to do the knit stitch, but has trouble consistently keeping his stitch count the same. Sophia had learned to knit when she was younger, had tried again in college and was struggling with it. So we all sat down with yarn and needles, and we taught, Nina and I taught them all to knit. And it was exciting. Amanda's really enthusiastic about it, and she wanted to know, what kind of project she could knit. And Nina suggested the project that she had learned with. She wanted to make an adult bonnet, and I'd written a pattern for her back then. And she's like, "Why don't you give her that pattern?" So I printed it. I had to figure out what it was called, and what I had it stored as. I printed it out, and we got her started on it. And they went back to Chicago. Nina and Sam are still here with us because when we were going to drive them down to Santa Fe on a road trip, and they were going to be there for a week. So I was all excited to have a couple of new knitters, and I wanted to buy them some notions. So my notions I keep in a bag like this. This was like some kind of free cosmetics bag or something my mother-in-law got years ago at some fancy department store. And she would get these bags, and then she would just give them to the girls so they could play with them. So two of the bags were like this. They're these suede bags, which is perfect for knitting. So I have both of those bags because the girls maybe played with them for a little, but they didn't need them. And I'm like, oh, I've got 2 knitting bags that were from there. And then I've got this, which is my notions bag. And I just really like this size. So Nina and I went to a local yarn shop, and my goal was to get some small notions bags like that, and then a needle gauge, measuring tape, some yarn needles for sewing things up, weaving in the ends, little folding snips, that kind of thing. So we went to the shop, and I was able to find one notions bag in the size I wanted. Most of them were larger. So this is the one I found. It's a really cute little bag. It's from shopktdesign.com. She's got an Etsy shop. She's got a website. She sells a lot of different things and a lot of other kinds of bags. I couldn't see anything like this on her site. So I could only find one, and it was exactly the right size. And I found most of the notions I wanted, but not all of them. So we were going on this trip to Santa Fe. So I said, well, when we're in Santa Fe, we're going to want to go to this one really nice shop that I had taken Nina to before and gotten her supplies there. And we'll go there and we'll see if we can get the rest of them. We went there. They also did not have notions bags on the right side. The gauge rulers or the needle gauges that a lot of shops are carrying right now are these wooden ones. They're very nice. They're like handmade wooden ones. You go to a yarn shop, you can get really nice tools there. And it just wasn't what I wanted because they were too long and they didn't have any bags the right size. Nobody had the folding scissors I was looking for. So I couldn't find anything there. So I came home. I bought this. This is what I was looking for. It's like the old Susan Bates needle gauge because it would fit in that Notions bag. It's got a needle gauge and a little ruler, and it's a stiff one. Got that. And then I have these little folding scissors that I really like. And they're called Slip and Snip. They're made in the USA. And what I love about mine is that they're very pointy tips. So if you need to get under like a very small, thin thread, you can do it. So I bought 2 pairs of those and the needle gauges I was looking for. The snips are not as pointy as they used to be. The new ones are not as pointy. But I still needed a Notions bag. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just try making one. So, I'll try to reverse engineer this one. And so I measured this one. It's slightly smaller than the one I have. And I, looked at the zipper. And it was kind of a cool plastic zipper. And this canvas, I'm like, and it's got grosgrain ribbon around here. I'm like, maybe I could do something like that. But I really wanted to use stuff I just had. So I just went on YouTube and I looked for DIY like pouch, small pouch. And so I found a couple of videos that showed how to make pouches. Some were lined and some were not lined. And it turned out that I had all of the things that I needed in order to make this lined pouch. I have small amounts of cotton fabric. This is fabrics that I bought back in 2020 when I was making masks for everyone in the family. So I had fabric. These tutorials were talking about a specific type of interfacing that was kind of pretty thick and fleecy. It's like a fleece almost. And I had some of that from when I made myself a toiletries bag a few years ago. So I had plenty of that. And then I just needed a zipper. And I have a few zippers, that I've accumulated. A couple of them were invisible zippers. That wasn't right. There's a few different zippers, but then I saw a zipper that was just loose in there. It wasn't in any packaging, and it was 10 inches long. It was a green zipper, and these tutorials said, get a zipper longer than what you need, because then you can, when you're sewing it up, you can just trim off the ends. So I said, perfect. So I figured out what the measurements were that I wanted, and I followed all the instructions, and I made this little Notions pouch. But I looked at it and I thought, I don't know, it might be too small. And it was. I couldn't fit everything in there. One of the problems was I made this too wide, but I forgot about the seam allowance for the zipper. I had seam allowance for the bottom, but forgot about it for the zipper. It ended up too small. It was nice, but it's too small. Well, I still had more materials left, but the problem was the zipper. Was I going to have to go out and buy a zipper? And then I thought about the green zipper that I had used for this and the fact that it was just loose. And I thought, I wonder if there's more of those zippers down in the basement. I wasn't sure. I had seen a whole bag of those green 10-inch zippers in the basement earlier this summer, but we've been clearing stuff out of the basement. And I remember when I came across those, like going, ugh, I don't need those. What am I going to do with them? And I was throwing a bunch of just crap out that was in the place where this was all stored. And I was afraid that I had just gone, where am I going to donate these? And trying to find a specific place that could take this versus I'm trying to clear stuff out. I can't find the perfect donee for each individual, unique, wacky thing. So I didn't know if they were down in the basement. I went down there, and sure enough, they were still there, and along with a stack of green canvas squares that had been cut out. These were all from an abandoned project that I was going to help a friend with, meaning she wanted me to do it, making 100 pencil pouches for a school she was sponsoring in another country. And I had gotten all the materials, I had ordered these zippers, and not only did I order 100 green zippers, I ordered them twice because this was so long ago that a lot of websites, trying to have a shopping cart on a website is not as easy as it is today. You had to try to find a way to make a secure website. You had to create your own shopping cart. It was really a pain in the rear to do. These days, you can just plug something like that into your website. But this company had any kind of zipper you could order in whatever length and any quantity, any type of zipper. You had all the choices that you wanted. But you either had to send them an email and then give them your credit card number in an email, which is also not secure. Or you had to do what you did a lot in those days, which was call them up, tell them what you wanted, and then give them your credit card number over the phone. So that's what I did. I called them up and I said, I'd like to order 100 10-inch zippers. Okay, what color? Green, this forest green. Okay, what type of zipper? Did all that. And how many of them did you want? I thought, I already told him this, but I'm like, 100. I want 100. It's like, okay, took the credit card number. And about a week later, this box appears, and I knew it was the zippers. And I just didn't have time to open it right away. I wasn't going to be working on this project for my friend right at that moment. And so it took 2 weeks before I opened it up. And I opened up this box, and I pulled out the first zipper, and it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I looked in there. There were 100 110-inch zippers. So the reason that he asked me how many of them I wanted was because he thought I was ordering 110-inch zippers. So I called the company back. I got somebody else answered the phone, and I explained. I said, I ordered 100 10-inch zippers, but the guy thought I wanted zippers that were 110 inches. And so he's like, oh, yeah. So they sent me the new zippers. So by this time, it's like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And I have, losing enthusiasm for this project. And also, I couldn't figure out a good way to do this assembly line. I could figure out how to make one, but it was very long and tedious. I'm like, I don't want to do this 100 times. And again, the internet wasn't what it is today. There was no YouTube. You couldn't just go on YouTube and figure out how to make a pouch. So I don't know what I did with the zippers, the 110-inch zippers. I have no idea what those are. But that's how I ended up with 100 10-inch green zippers in my basement that have been sitting there for at least 15 years, closer to 20, I'm thinking. But there's also all of this green canvas that was there for the pouches. So I'm like, oh, I'll just make one that isn't lined out of this green canvas. And so I made a pouch out of the green canvas. And it was the right size, and I did a nice job on that corner, but not such a nice job on that one. So I thought, well, there's more of this where that came from. So I went down. And then I decided, since it was not a lined pouch, I actually didn't need a seam on the bottom. And so I made this one. And it was exactly the right size. It was everything about it, right dimensions. Everything that I'd bought to put in this Notions bag fit in there. And so I took the two of them downstairs and put them on the kitchen table, and I was kind of looking for a box, and my husband came in and saw them. He's like, well, this one is really cool looking. That one's just kind of utilitarian. I'm like, yeah, but that's what I had. And he's like, okay. And so then I was thinking about it, and then he came up to my office for some other reason later in the day, and he saw this little one that I had made. And he goes, well, that one's really nice. And I said, yeah, I know, but it's too small. So then the next morning I thought, well, I've got all this practice, and I have plenty of zippers and plenty of fabric. So I made a lined one in the right dimensions. I've got the corners, look nice. The fabric inside is nice. It zips up, and they're not identical. I mean, they each have their own personality, but they're both presentable to give to two new knitters at the same time. So that's my story of making a notions bag. So if anybody has a need for 95 10-inch green zippers, I got you covered. So in case you're interested in what is in these 2 pouches, I have a needle gauge, some locking stitch markers, the folding snips, a measuring tape, some yarn needles, and I like the little tube to hold them in. And then I got them the sample of Eucalan as well. So they're all set to get started on finishing their work and getting their ends woven in and future projects. But that's what is inside each of these pouches. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.